What's up? So ever since I started the $20 drum set series, a lot of people have been asking me, hey, I want to buy this used kit or I want to buy this used cymbal, but I'm scared and I think I'm going to get ripped off and I don't know what to look for. So I've bought a few used kits in my life and I've bought a whole lot of used cymbals in my life. So I put together this little list of things to check over when you go to buy a used kit. So let's take a look. So, when buying used cymbals, the first and most obvious thing you want to check is to make sure it's the same thing that's posted on the ad that you saw. So if you see an ad that looks like this, and you show up and it looks like this, then probably you don't want to buy the cymbal. So the first thing you want to do is just visually inspect the cymbal. You just want to make sure there's no obvious big cracks, dents, or dings like you see on this cymbal. So the next thing you want to check is for keyholing. So you just want to check the hole and see if there's any cracks. Now if there are cracks, most likely it's because they did not use a cymbal sleeve and it was just metal to metal contact, which is bad. So the next thing you want to do is what I call the edge test. You just take your finger and rub it along the edge. So if the edge is smooth, then most likely they took care of the cymbal when transporting it and used a cymbal bag. But if it's all rough and chewed up and crusty, then most likely they didn't take care of the cymbal and probably used it as a hockey puck on concrete. Okay, well maybe not that, but it's a good sign to tell if they took care of the cymbal or not. And then similar to the edge test is the pinch test. You just gotta pinch your fingers and rub it across the edge of the cymbal. When doing the edge test, you might not feel a crack, but if you do the pinch test, you have a greater chance of finding the crack if there is a crack. So I feel something right here, so what I'll do is take my fingernail and rub it across. And as you can hear, that is a crack. So to double check that it is a crack, you just want to flip the cymbal over and see if it's on the other side. And if the mark is still there, then it's obviously a crack. So another thing to check is the engraving. Now in the case of this cymbal and most other Sabian cymbals, Sabian does a horrible job of engraving their cymbals. It's not very deep and it's hard to see. But if we look at this set of hi-hats, we can see the Zildjian engraving is much deeper. So if you go out to buy a Sabian HHX Evolution Crash, and you see a Zildjian engraving on it, it's probably fake. So the last test is the eBay/barcode test. If you have a smartphone, I suggest you download the eBay app. So all cymbals have barcodes on a little sticker that's under the bell, and of course if you're buying a used cymbal it might not have it, but if it does have it, you can scan the barcode and check that it's, the same cymbal. So if you scan it and a different symbol shows up, then something sketchy is probably going on and you might not want to buy it. Alright, so now drums. Just like cymbals, you want to visually inspect the drums. So you just want to look over the kit and make sure all the pieces are there. So make sure all the lugs are there, all the tension rods are there, and in the case of this kit it has floor tom leg memory locks, so you want to make sure the memory locks are there. So just glance over the kit and make sure nothing big is missing. So once you check and see that, there's no missing pieces, there's a few key places you want to look on the drums to see, the overall condition of the drums. So the first place is right below the rack tom on the bass drum. As I'm sure many of you know, there's a high possibility of the rack tom hitting the bass drum when you play it. So you want to check the bass drum and make sure there's no scuffs or dings or dents on the bass drum right below the rack tom. And then you also want to check the shell of the tom, because there's a high possibility of that hitting the rim of the snare drum. So again, just check it over, make sure there's no dings or dents on it, and you'll be good to go. The next place you want to check is the bass drum hoop. Now if you take the bass drum pedal off and the hoop is in pristine condition, then most likely they took care of the kit, but there is a possibility that they are trying to trick you. So all you have to do is feel around and check the whole bass drum hoop. Because if you notice from the player's perspective of the kit, you know, there's part of the hoop that you can't see, so there's a chance that the seller flipped the hoop over so you can't see the marks. Now, of course, there's a high chance that there is a mark, especially if they didn't, you know, use a little pad to, you know, protect the hoop. So honestly, this isn't a big deal, but you just want to make sure the whole hoop isn't all chewed up. So next you want to check for any discoloration on the drum. You want to make sure that each drum is one color, one consistent color, and also that the color is the same from drum to drum. Now, if one tom is darker than the other, then most likely, you know, they either left it outside, or they used the other one more than the other, or they didn't use a case for one. So really, there's a million reasons why it could be darker than the other, so just keep that in mind. So depending on if the kit is wrapped, you want to check that the wrap is in good condition. So I just want to give it the old fingernail test on the seam and see what happens. So as you can see here, the wrap is fine, it's not coming loose, so that means it's in good condition. So second, you want to check the tension rods. So you just want to go around each drum and tune up the head a little bit. So when you do this, you get a feel of how the tension rods feel, and you'll see if they, you know, kept them lubed or if they didn't, and if they're all crusty and rusty. And if you do feel some, you know, resistance, I suggest you take a tension rod off and look at the tension rod and kind of just inspect it and see if it's, you know, all crusty and rusty, because if it is, it's a bad sign. So if you want to go deeper with this test, you can bring a Q-tip and put it in the lug and pull it out and see the condition. So I guarantee that every lug from every drum set in the world has some crud inside of it. So if you pull it out and there's a little bit of stuff on it like you see here, it's not a bad sign. But if you pull it out and it's like completely black or completely brown and it's like dry, then usually it means they did not lube the lugs. So the black stuff you see on this Q-tip is actually metal shavings, alright? So like in the case of these lugs, when it's a metal to metal contact, the tension rods, every time you tighten them, they shave off a little bit of metal. And now if they're rusty inside, then that rust acts as like an abrasive. So pretty much imagine you're like putting sandpaper inside of the lug, and every time you tighten it, it shaves off more metal from the tension rod. So the rate at which this happens is like way slower than you think. So again, it's not the end of the world if you see some black stuff, but if it's really rusty, you just want to keep that in mind. So third is the hoops and bass drum claws. Now this sort of falls into the visual category, but I thought it was important, so I gave it its own caption. So you just want to check all the hoops, so the batter side and the resonant side hoops, and make sure that they're nice, clean, and smooth. So just like the cymbals, you want to make sure, you know, they didn't take their drums to a gig, kick them across the parking lot, and then, you know, kick them all the way home. So of course, just look at the hoops, and also use your hands and fingers, because your fingers will feel, you know, roughness before your eyes can, you know, really pick it out. And the reason why I say bass drum claws and not the bass drum hoop is because the claw will meet the surface of the ground before the hoop does. So last and most important is to check the bearing edges.
That's an E.
So the reason I say this last is there might be coated heads on the drums, so if everything else looks good and you want to buy the kit, be like, hey, I want to take the heads off and look inside the drum, and if everything is good, then I'll buy it, and if not, then well, screw you. Okay, well, don't say that, but you just want to look over the bearing edges, and this head actually is a Power Stroke 4, and this is the head that was on the drum when I bought this drum, and by the way, I bought this kit used, so it's kind of hard to see because it's a 2-ply head on the edge. So I asked the guy, like, hey, you know, do you mind if I take this head off? I want to look at it. And he's like, oh yeah, sure. But if the seller's like, no, you can't take it off, then be like, all right, I'm not buying the kit then, and just leave. And then they'll be like, oh no, okay, come back. So again, you want to check over every drum and every side of the drum. So check the batter side and the resonant side. And again, your finger is a really good tool at finding these sort of dents and cracks. And also, while you're checking, you want to see if there's any splitting of the plies. So also, while you have the heads off, or if they're clear heads, just look inside the drum and see if there's any discoloration. So just like checking the outside of the drums, you want to check the inside and make sure, you know, they weren't in a flood or something like that. So again, make sure the whole drum is one uniform color and that the color from drum to drum is the same. Holy crap, that was a lot of information to squeeze into this one video. So if you have your own tips or tricks, or if there's something that I forgot to say that you think is important when buying used gear, please throw it in the comments. And also, if you're watching this video because you're trying to buy a used drum set, please read the comments and see if there's any tips that you think are useful. So before I ramble on too much, I wanted to tell y'all that I post weekly videos about drums every week, so feel free to subscribe. I post weekly videos every week, so yeah, whatever. But yeah, also I wanted to know, is the kit you're playing on right now, did you buy it used or did you buy it new? So again, hopefully you found this video informative, and thank you for watching. I'll see you next week.